Welcome to Your Real, Your Ideal. Hi, Sandy.
Good morning. We've got our plaid and our Cash Friday going on here.
I know it's
Good
Fall
morning.
Plaid Friday.
All plaid Friday, beautiful November. It's beautiful in
Yes,
Durango. I've been in
beautiful.
Oklahoma City for 8 days, so I haven't been here, and we're happy to come back to nice weather. So
Nice, nice. I don't know how it is in Durango or Oklahoma City, but Omaha is prime leaf time right now. I just, as we were starting up, took another picture of the tree outside my window because I've been watching it progress over the last few weeks, and we're supposed to have some wind today. So I'm like, oh, I hope it doesn't lose all of its leaves.
but the thing I'll tell you is when we were in a comment I'll make is when we were in Boise, the leaf color was gorgeous and we had a huge windstorm. I took Zeke out for a walk and for different colors. I got the most amazing pictures of that dog with these fresh leaves in color before they browned up. They're probably the
Oh,
prettiest pictures I've ever taken. So take the
I
dogs
love
out
it.
for a walk if it's
Okay.
windy when they're
Have them
still
get in the
fresh,
leaves. Yeah.
because you can't
I,
put the dogs in the tree, right? The
right.
tree can be the
And
background.
I have I'm looking at the ground. There's a whole pile down there. So I could get some great pictures of them. So good idea. Thank you. Okay. So that was a great idea, Sandy. I am going to do that. How's that for a compliment to open our segment on compliments?
Thank you. I like it. And it's
It
genuine.
was genuine. I meant it. Um, so today we're talking about compliments. We're talking about words matter. And what brought this about was in conversation on one of the podcasts, you said you asked a question about,
What's the best
um,
compliment you've ever gotten?
right. And my mind went specifically to one that I remember. And I shared it. And it was somebody who had said something to me. And it was a positive reflection of me and my mother, which I always appreciate. So that started this whole conversation.
And I'm going to tell you a takeaway. This is a takeaway that I've had from this is what I expected. It was way, way more than that. When we said we were going to talk about compliments, I put out there, whether it was texts, asking the question, I put it on social media platforms. And what I wanted to get out of it was I wanted to prove validation on how deeply embedded our values were with us, which it did. But there was so much more. I mean, there were so many takeaways. There were some that were so emotional. And I would tell you, Amy, the reaction like you had of 2 seconds giving it, I people didn't struggle with this. They hadn't thought about it, but there was a standout, and there was a stand when they gave me their specific compliment. It was not it's this one or this one. There's a few gave a few, but they knew in their heart which one it was. And if they didn't have an example that was specific, very quickly they could say what compliment. If they couldn't acknowledge who the person was, maybe it's said more than once, I think is when that would happen, how quickly they could identify with the compliments that meant the most to them.
Yeah.
And the answers weren't uh, uh, being told I was the best CFO at work, that I did the best tax returns, that I made best of Omaha 10 years in a
Yeah.
row. Those
Right.
were not the things that came out. They were authentically real. I mean, it really was a bit emotional for me to have conversations with people as we dove into this, because it cracked open conversations that were very real. And then one last thing I'll say is Garrett turned it back on me and asked me the best compliment, and I got tearful. And I have shared that compliment, which is a very simple thing, and the story probably 3 times in my life. And every time I get choked up when I tell it. And
Oh
so,
my gosh.
but
I
it
love
causes
that.
that reaction, when it's, and I don't even hesitate on what the situation, but it was a very simple thing. But, and then the last thing that I'd love to talk about, and then I'm going to throw it back to you, is you had called you had brought up the phrase words matter, where I was more focusing on compliments when we were diving into this topic and just brushing on, generally we go into this cold, but generally what we were looking for. And I probably wasn't really sold on words matter. I was kind of thinking compliments. And that is the resounding theme I felt after having conversations with people and getting feedback is words matter, but even more so, it's not the words you think. It's almost every compliment words that people might say on an everyday basis, but it's very authentic and it's real, and they don't even know that what they said was so meaningful. I had probably 3 different people that flipped it back to me, and their compliment was something I gave to them that I remember saying, because the reason I remember is because it was very valid and I noticed it, but I had no idea that it hung so much meaning to them. So words matter even when you don't know it.
I love that point, because I think we do not know the full effect that we have on other people with our words. And like, I can guarantee that when Peggy told me that in Kansas City at the bookstore and gave me that compliment, she probably doesn't even remember. Like, it wasn't a big deal to her because she just said it authentically. She wasn't trying to like, she wasn't trying to get something from that compliment. She just said it. She it was
Words
authentic,
matter.
it was simple, and it resonated with me.
And back to our core theme of this whole podcast on real, we know innately when something is real. Okay.
Right.
Nobody, we just know it. And we also know in our hearts when it's real in us too. So there's this deep connection with compliments, a real compliment, right? The moving compliments that I'd never thought about before, because it's the intersection of knowing what's real with yourself and what you're valuing with yourself and truly being valued, and you're shining, right? You're projecting that. It's back to, again, the core of having the core values, but actually resonating them in the goodness that you bring. Because a compliment isn't something you've done bad or mediocre. It's something that shines in you. And so you are projecting your authentic self.
Right. Okay. So I did a little research. I know you did research reaching out to people, which I do want to hear some more about that. But one of the things that I found out is, or which I knew this, but reading it confirmed it, we have to be authentic with our compliments. You can't have an ulterior motive when you're giving a compliment, like flattery. Flattery,
good word, yes,
is not what we want to go for here. Like, you can feel flattered, but you don't want to compliment people so much that your compliments don't have any value. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah. And I did read that, and I thought of you. I should have sent you this article, and actually I'll link it in the show notes. But there's an article that says compliments show that you value others. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's right in lane with Sandy and your happiness factor and how it plays into that value.
It was, I got to tell you, and here it's like, I'm getting verklempt. Wasn't that, no, that was the Barbara Walters, the Saturday Night Live, the podcasters that were
right.
Verklempt was Baba Wawa, right? Yeah. But when people came back and they weren't, when people came back to me and repeated compliments that I gave to them that I meant deeply, right? But they might have been very simple things, right? But I meant them deeply. And especially there were some people that I know more as acquaintances that piped up and shared words that I shared with them that they've kept with them for years. And that isn't an importance thing on me. That is an authentic connection with words that matter. right? It isn't, oh, Sandy told me, because I do think back to flattery, we can flatter ourselves that our words matter, but I say a lot of words. I talk a lot, and it's interesting the ones that matter to other people, right?
Right.
Nobody told me the best compliment is something I said on a podcast, right? Or,
Right.
um,
Right.
but those, I mean, they deeply moved me to realize that. And I think that's helped my value factor in the the happiness level and the effect of valuing others in a very authentic way.
Yeah.
Opening
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
eyes to it. You got to listen to it. You got to be back to curious and listening, and that reciprocal factor of others in your life. It's not what just they're giving to you, it's what you're giving to them. And what you give to them, not only does it need to be authentic, you have to learn, you have to want to know them in a deeper way. Even if it's listening carefully to a conversation or noticing something, it's the focus is on them, not you.
Right. So part of that is being humble, and because you're letting other people shine, and you're not focusing on yourself. So a compliment that resonates with me that wasn't even towards me. It was about a friend of mine. And I think I've mentioned this before, but I was talking to the mom about the daughter, and I said she had done something, and I'm like, I just so appreciate her. She's such a good person, because I know as a mother, it's so important to hear how great your kids are from
Right.
somebody who's not related, who is just, and so anyway, and the mom said, she's a block off the old chip. And
Like it.
I know. And I was like, okay, so how humble is that? Because a lot of people say she's a chip off the old block or whatever. Um, but I was like, that made the mother humble, and it really highlighted the daughter. And I'm telling you, that was probably 10 or 15 years ago. And that still sticks in my
That's
head
awesome.
of that's exactly what I want for my kids. And anyway, it's just a compliment of my friend, but it has stuck with me of, oh, isn't that a great just life goal right there?
Right, right there. And even the acknowledgement of what were the value compliments, the best that everyone got. It's so empowering to read them, and not with the reaction of, I wish that was mine, or, oh, that's going to be the compliment I want to get. Back to, I want what she's having, but making the best of what you have.
Yeah.
And there is I'm going to find it in a second. It was when I was on my trip. I had my little quotes, and I loved this quote, and I'm going to find it, Amy.
Okay.
I want to find this little quote. It was Carlos Santana, and it was about, basically, it's not about the cards you've been dealt, but it's how you play your cards.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
If I said it correctly. And I
Uh-huh.
love that, because it's back to, it made me think of the compliments, because that is the compliment you receive is authentic to you. And it's even the fact that it's been recognized and you're shining those values within you and what's core to you, and it's being recognized, makes it exponentially better. But back to, gosh, somebody else's compliment, I want that to be my compliment. No, that's not your hand. That's not your cards. You got to understand
Right.
your own hand and play your hand.
And you got to be able to celebrate other people.
Right.
Like, look at them, celebrate them, and not think about yourself. Like, that's awesome for you. That's a great compliment.
So celebrating yourself, there was a conversation Garrett and I had. We were going into town, and it's funny because it stuck with both of us, because we're like, oh my gosh, the word for people who can't celebrate other people is usually embedded in insecurities, right? And I don't remember who, what, why we were talking about. We looked at each other and we said, oh my gosh, I am too old to be insecure, and insecure. It's just like, I'm so glad that we don't. And again, I'm just saying, we're just happy in our own skin. We're past that, because a lot of it is with maturity, we hope we form in our own minds, bodies, and we're happy with the cards that we've been dealt, but we're just too old for that stuff. It's so,
Right.
it helps our happiness factor to be totally content with what we have most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect.
So, good segue into one of the next articles I read. There are people who have issues receiving compliments. And I'm sure you know people who you give them a compliment and they brush it off. And I know I do it sometimes too. It's like I get it and I'm like, I'm not sure
I hate
if
compliments. I really don't like I don't like them. I
I
had a whole
know
blog
it.
I wrote about this. The
I,
compliment. A nun told me just say thank you.
well, and that's exactly what I read is just say thank you. Um, don't negate it. But a lot of times the people who get uncomfortable with compliments, it's because they don't see that in themselves. So the compliment may come and then they don't recognize themselves in that compliment. So they brush it off and they're like, I'm not 100% there. That's usually me because somebody will say something. I'm like, yeah, just so you know, that's not completely where my head was, but okay. So, um, but just saying thank you is the best way to receive a compliment and not try to justify it, simplify it, negate it, anything like that. It's just
Say
thank you for
thank you.
that.
But I'll say one thing, I have a learning that's come out of your research. I have an aha moment because when you said that, I thought, boy, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. I'm saying how there's nothing better than a compliment, but yet I forgot I'm horrible about taking compliments. But Amy, there's a difference between compliments and flattery too. And
Yes.
I will tell you, if it feels like flattery, if it feels, this is me, okay? If it feels like flattery, if it feels, when I say non-authentic, it doesn't mean they don't mean it, but they don't have enough to base it off of, right? It's more surface. It's a surface compliment. Those are the ones that I'm like, but those deeply felt compliments, those words that came off of a situation that I just know in my heart are authentic, I have no problem with those.
Right.
And it's not even thank you. It's like, you don't know how much that meant to hear that, or it. So there is from both sides, it's good to acknowledge flattery, authenticity, but then we can't overthink it. So it gets back to, it's great advice to just say thank you, because those are the ones that aren't going to stick with you. But those true, genuine ones, keep them close to your heart and don't try to overthink, because it might not be flattery. It might be more than you thought. It likely came from a good place, from a good motive. So just say thank you. And that's
Right.
great advice. And I'm not
Right.
good at it. I like to change the subject. I like to, no, here's my favorite. I like to then give them flattering back.
Yeah.
You look cute in that dress, but you look great because you got the necklace.
I love it.
You're so good at work, but oh my gosh, you kill those tax returns,
Right.
cross flattery.
Yeah. 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 And we're taught to be humble. And so sometimes when you're humble, getting a compliment conflicts with that being humble, like accepting the accolades or accepting. So I think it's easier to accept for me personally when people are close to me, like the people who really know me. If they say something, then I'm like, I thank you for that.
And
If
not saying what they think you want to hear, because our friends
right,
can be really good about that, because Amy's having a down day. Amy is the holidays got away from her and she didn't stick with her exercise routine, so I'm going to tell her she looks super skinny in that outfit and she's not happy with the client, and I'm going to blame it on the client and say how she's brilliant. What is that?
right,
Is that
right.
flattery or is that just being nice?
Yeah, it's hard to, yeah, that's a good
There's a word for
question
that.
because you're right. Sometimes our friends are also the most enabling of
Enabling,
us.
that's a good word. Trying to
Yeah.
make us feel better.
Right. Trying to lift our spirits, and it's out of good intention.
So, another takeaway I've had from this conversation is a phrase Garrett and I always have used, which is if you feel it, say it. And I'm saying this on a positive side, not if you feel it, say it.
Yeah.
Oh, gee,
Yeah.
liar, liar, the negative things. But sometimes those things that you observe, or those back to the little things, if you feel it deeply, like, wow, that was a really kind thing that she did. I watched that from the side and she made the other person feel comfortable. She's so good at that. One of the compliments somebody told me is she said, she chooses her words well. And that was a big compliment to her. And I'll tell you, her values are embedded in hope and peace. And she kidded me and said, "You call me Switzerland," because she's very, very good
Yeah.
at choosing the right words at the right time. And they're always authentic. And isn't that funny that was, a compliment to her? But if you feel it or observe something, and sometimes it's in work, that you see somebody is good at that, or, something that you've noticed with an example, right? It's always good to give overalls because some are overall, but if you see something in the moment, if you feel it, say it.
Yeah.
And those little things matter. Those little bits and pieces, you might think it, but sometimes I don't think we always share it.
Yeah. So here's a question for you. When I was doing all this research and thinking about it, and I know how compliments land with me, but my love language is words, words of affirmation.
Mhm.
So is that your love language?
It is.
Oh, so for both of us, words resonate. Now I'm wondering if somebody doesn't have that love language, if compliments resonate as much to them.
I think maybe in a different way, because I'm going to use Garrett as an example. Garrett couldn't give me a specific, I'm going to try that again. Garrett couldn't give me a specific example right off the top of his head, but without any hesitation, he said, it's when I make a positive impact, not with words. He didn't get specific, not with words, but it's got to be a positive impact. Now, his is physical time together. No, that I'm confusing too, not physical
Time.
touch,
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
together. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, how do you make a positive impact? It's investing time, right? That positive impact could be the success of a business. It could be the success of a relationship. But I thought it was interesting for him. It wasn't remembering the words, but he clearly knew what type of outcome and why he was investing that time.
Yeah. So interesting because I asked my daughter this question, who's living with us right now, and her love language is physical touch.
Okay.
Like she melts in my arms when I give her a hug. Like she's like, you can just, and she was always the kid who touched me, like, would come up and she's just very physical. So, um, she could not come up with a compliment. She was like, I
Because
don't
that's
know.
not yet, that's a very good association, Amy.
Yeah.
Did you ask her? It'd be interesting, not a compliment, but like what situations or when did she? Because that's Garrett said I couldn't think of a specific one. And I don't know the love language of my middle son, but what's interesting is I sent him a text and he said, "Do you want something specific or broad?" I said, "Start with specific." Told me right away. And it was really interesting to me because that text came right back and it was very specific. It was specific on the touch. It had to do with something a football coach told him. And he took my helmet with both hands, looked me. I mean, it was a scene out of a movie, but then I said broader and he quickly knew the broader as well. He kind of thought in both terms. So it would be interesting. I'm going to have him do the love languages. That's my takeaway from this. It would be interesting to correlate. But what I did find is everyone where I do know their core values, the compliments completely tied back to their core values. It was a
Yeah.
complete correlation back
Yeah.
to the core values.
Yay. I love that. That's awesome. All right. So great conversation today. I do think words matter. I think compliments, just authentic compliments, telling people when you feel it in the moment to share it and say nice things to others will only make the world better.
Doesn't it
You
get
know,
back to, and they always say those phrases like, be careful of what you say to someone because you don't know what they're going through. But it goes the other way. Be generous with what you say because they might need to hear it, right?
yes. So just to that point, I started watching Made this week
Oh, how is it?
on Netflix. Have
Okay.
you
No,
it's about it's
on a
really
book, isn't it? On the book of the maid that was trying to get by with the young child, or no?
yes,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
what it is. Yeah, I didn't know there was a book.
It was, they got mixed
Really?
reviews. Some
Well,
people loved it and some people didn't like some of the things she had to say. Yeah.
yeah. And I've only just started it, but words matter. And that's what the second episode really brought to light. It resonated with me on this topic of how it makes people feel when they're not honored, when they're not like the value. And I know it's just a TV show, but it it made me it changed my perspective, or it opened up my eyes to opportunities, I would say, that on how to honor people and make sure that that you are celebrating others and not bringing them down.
And at the
That's
end of the day, words matter, but we cannot control other people's words. We can't.
right.
And that's kind of a running joke with Garrett and I. Well, he has this habit of repeating what he thinks I should say. Like if I get a little snippy, well, you should, well, blah, blah, blah. And I said, why don't you just talk to yourself,
Yeah.
because they're my words, or I'll kid and I'll repeat exactly what he said. And my point is they're my words and I can apologize for them, but I really don't want you to tell me my words should be. But we
Yeah.
can't control other people's words, but we can control ours. And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, if we
Sure.
all control our words and we're intentional with them, and if we're authentic and we're real and we're generous in our praise because we're humble in our givings, right? And it doesn't always have to be all about us. Wouldn't that be a beautiful world?
Oh my gosh, it would be so beautiful. It would. Okay, so challenge for this week. I would say let's try to give a compliment to somebody, a real authentic in the moment. You see something and you give them a compliment. It can be someone that you are in a close relationship with, or it could be a stranger, whatever it is. Try to make someone's day with a compliment.
Love it. Love it.
It's
And
easy.
it's easy. It's easy. And think about your best compliment. It's a good exercise to go through. And I'll tell you, back to the impact on reading these was the self-awareness, the level of self-awareness in answering that question and being able to have an aha moment and even little bits of conversations on why. I think it will energize yourself to think about that best compliment and think about the whys and your why, right? It's going to tie
Yeah.
back to your why
Yeah.
and to shine that compliment in what you do and keep doing it
Yeah.
because there's a reason why you loved that compliment. And sometimes we have to go back to those little pieces.
Yeah, that's great. So give a compliment and reflect on your best compliment. Very good. If you need ideas for compliments, I am attaching a list of the 100 best compliments.
Oh, nice.
We'll see what you think. Some of them I was like, I don't know about that one.
What's number
But
one? What's number one? We got to know number one. And then
so I don't have, they're not
they're not
numbered,
numbered.
but like you have the best laugh. I like your style. You have impeccable manners. So it really is, just appreciating other people and what they're putting out in the world.
The two most popular ones I heard from the people I polled, I would say was you look young, and
Yeah.
and the other one is you are kind. Something
Oh,
with you're kind, you have a kind heart, you're a caring
mm,
person. That was probably the other big one.
yeah, that's a good one.
All right,
Okay.
Amy, until next week, you are a
Right.
great co-podcaster, and I really appreciate you. You're very good at this. You are, and the research and keeping us on task. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Sandy. Right back at you. I love you.
All right. Love you. Bye.
Bye.